I'll give you another example. This is more of a collective example now, political example. It probably pissed some people off, but look at the Republican Party in the United States. Look at it in terms of like what's been happening in the last 20, 30 years with the Republican Party. And especially in the last 10 to 5 years with the Republican Party. Because the Republican Party is deeply dysfunctional. And the Republican Party has a serious fundamental problem with avoiding truth. They have been avoiding truth for decades now. And they keep avoiding it, but they're too arrogant to actually admit that they're avoiding truth. And so they're clinging and they're doubling down and tripling down on their avoidance of truth. And this just spins them deeper and deeper into delusion, to the point where now we have the rise of Trump and MAGA and all this. But really, where did this come from? This came from a trend within the Republican Party that really started with, George W. Bush and even before that, where they are just deeply avoiding the truth of the changing of society. This is the fundamental problem of conservatives and traditionalist sort of people, is that society is always evolving and changing. There's new technologies. Culture is always changing and evolving. Religion is always changing and evolving. Language is changing and evolving. Sexual norms are changing and evolving. And fundamentally, conservatives don't want change. They don't like change. They're scared of change. And so they're avoiding the change, and they are putting the brakes on every change, basically, that they're uncomfortable with, in the hopes that they can stop it and they can sort of like keep things the way they were. It's that Trumpian MAGA fantasy of, America was make America great again the way it was in the 1950s or whenever. Of course, it was never great in the 1950s or ever in that sense. It's just a fantasy. But there's just like certain truths that are being avoided. Like, for example, the truth that the demonization of homosexuality and transgender people, that this was based in delusion and selfishness and closed-mindedness. That's the truth of that situation. And so, now that homosexuality and trans stuff is more acceptable, generally speaking, we sort of acknowledge the limited, small-minded way in which we used to think about those things. The same thing with like racism. Racism used to be more acceptable. Now it's not acceptable. But for a lot of conservatives, they're not comfortable with with admitting and facing these difficult truths. Which is not to say that liberals and progressives don't also avoid facing difficult truths. They do. They do. So don't get me wrong here that I'm only picking on the Republican Party. But if you don't see that the Republican Party in America has an especially bad case of avoiding truth, you're fucking blind. You're fucking blind. And this is why Trump is so appealing, is because Trump came along and Trump just said, you know what? You guys love avoiding the truth. That's what you guys vote for. Well, fuck. If that's what you're going to vote for, I'm a master. I'm a master at avoiding the truth. That's what I spent my entire life doing. I can help you guys avoid the truth to the hilt. Like there's no limit to how much I can help you guys avoid truth. And then the Republican Party is like, yes, perfect, because we're not going to admit that we're wrong in any way. We're not going to actually reflect about our behaviors. We're not going to actually change our mind. We're not going to change our mind on religion. We're not going to change our mind on abortion. We're not going to change our mind on race relations. We're not going to change our mind on gay and trans rights. We're not going to change our mind on global warming. We don't want to change our mind on anything. So yes, please, somebody come along, somebody like Trump, some media enterprise like OAN or Fox News, come along and tell me everything I want to hear and tell me how I can avoid facing the truth. That's the function you're going to serve in my life, and I will happily vote for you. I will be your most rabid supporter. This is the Republican Party in a nutshell, and it's all blowing up in their face. It's literally destroying fucking democracy. This is how democracy is destroyed. By people who don't want to face the truth, the changing reality, the changing reality of a globalizing world, the changing reality that America is not the best country in the world anymore, the changing reality that many other countries in the world have better healthcare systems, have better economic systems, have better human rights, have better education systems, have better governments, have less corruption. The reality that the climate is changing and that we can't keep polluting the way we've been polluting for the last 100 years. The reality we have to wean ourselves off of oil. The reality that our military interventions abroad and American empire that has been functioning for the last 50 to 100 years, that is also unsustainable. The reality that leaching resources through capitalism from third world countries via imperial exploitation, the way that America has been doing for the last 80 years or so, that is also unsustainable, and that basically is devilry. See, the Republican Party doesn't want to face these things. The reality that our politicians are so corrupt and bought out by capitalism run amok through unlimited campaign donations and so forth and lobbying, and that these things need to change. The truth, the difficult truth that the Constitution as it was formed by our founding fathers is no longer completely relevant and sufficient to address the problems that we have in society today, thanks to technology and other factors and changing culture, that the Constitution itself has to change. New amendments have to be passed. The Constitution needs to be rethought. Conservatives do not want to face any of these. And so we have the problems that we have. Now, again, this does not mean that Democrats and progressives don't also have certain delusions. They do. They also avoid certain difficult truths. They do. Socialists avoid difficult truths too. They do. But it's particularly toxic right now within the Republican Party. It doesn't have to be that way. They could change, but it's going to be a cold day in hell before they change. They keep doubling and tripling down.